Cartoon character or Asterix the Gaul?
I think you're making an allusion to my hairstyle when you talk about Tintin, aren't you, Francois? You
Not
cheeky,
at all.
cheeky
Not
man.
at all. Not at all.
How about you, Asterix?
Asterix, definitely. Sorry.
You've got the same kind of girth of his sidekick, haven't you? I didn't mean that, mate. Don't hit me, don't hit me.
He says he's not fat. He's just well built.
Francois Picard there, my rugby-playing chum. We're playing tomorrow night. That should be good fun. Time now, though, to turn our attentions to, more serious matters. The France 24 debate. Tonight we're looking at Tunisia. Ben Ali's democracy. President Ben Ali is lined up for re-election in Tunisia. The vote's on Sunday, but there's no effective opposition. The media is mainly controlled by the government. The opposition, as it is approved. Real voices of dissent do not exist. If they're heard, they're silenced by a system that has human rights groups posing serious questions about what happens there. Meanwhile, the Ben Ali name is omnipresent, it seems. Politics, business, the name is linked to most money-making ventures in the country. Many Tunisians look naturally to Ben Ali as their leader. Before we meet our guests, let's take a closer look at the president himself.
Zine Al Abidine Ben Ali is sworn in as the new president of Tunisia. It's the 7th of November, 1987. Ben Ali takes over from Habib Bourguiba, judged too old and unfit to run the country. Ben Ali, then prime minister, becomes leader. Critics call it a medical coup d'etat. Before he came to power, Ben Ali served in the army. He married the daughter of a general in a first marriage. He was the head of national security for 10 years. He then became interior minister and was later promoted to prime minister. He became president at the age of 51, and although many doubted him at first, he promised to bring further democracy to the country. He began progressive reforms, an era dubbed the Spring of Tunis, but it didn't last long. In the early 90s, the nation was faced with the Islamist threat, a menace that emerged in the 80s and that seemed strengthened by the rise of Islamism in neighboring Algeria. Violence in the region triggered mass arrests, interrogations, and reportedly torture in Tunisia. Human rights activists criticized the regime, saying public liberties were restricted, the press controlled, and government opponents jailed. Officials deny the accusations, and the government's economic progress helped quench the controversy at home and abroad. In 2003, the former French leader Jacques Chirac played down Tunisia's controversial human rights record, saying that the first human right is the right to eat. Chirac's comments shocked a Tunisian lawyer who went on a hunger strike after allegedly being harassed by the regime.
He minimized the violations in Tunisia. I witnessed it myself. People have been rotting in jail for years.
From 2000 onwards, a string of Tunisian intellectuals expressed their concern. The fight for freedom of the press, led by the journalist Tawik Ben Brik, remains a symbol. And despite mounting international pressure, the regime refused to budge. In 2002, the president changed the constitution, allowing him to run for an unlimited number of mandates. His last one was marked by the growing presence of Ben Ali's second wife, Leila. The first lady, a former hairdresser, is often accused of benefiting from nepotism. She and her family, the Trablses, control most business sectors in the country. Officially, it is the last time Ben Ali is eligible to run for president. This is because of an age limit imposed by the Constitution. Yet his exit from politics could still be far out on the horizon, just like in 1987 during Bourguiba's rule.
Portrait there of President Ben Ali. Let's get straight on and meet our guests. From Tunisian television, Ouda Zagdoudi is joining us, the correspondent in Brussels, here in Paris to talk to us. Ouda, thank you for taking the time to join us here in France 24. On the other side of the plateau, again from Tunisia, Emna Ben Arab, Tunisian MP, a member of President Ben Ali's party, the Democratic Constitutional Rally. Thank you very much for joining us. By satellite, we're joined by Amel Boubekeur, who is in Beirut. Amel is from the Carnegie Middle East Centre. Amel, thank you very much for taking time to be with us.
Hi.
And also we have our own France 24 correspondent, Melissa Bell, who is in Tunis. She'll be joining us by phone throughout this debate. I'd like to start here in the studio with our MP. Emna Ben Arab of President Ben Ali's party. You saw the report. You heard my introduction. How fair do you think we've been so far on Tunisia and on the ruling party?
Thank you. I think lots of stuff that has been said here in this report is unfair to the Tunisian regime's record so far. I mean, President Ben Ali's record is fairly positive in terms of economic achievements, in terms of social achievements, as well as political achievements. I mean, Tunisia's democratic process is barely 20 years old. Before that, we had other priorities. Political reforms were not part of our priorities. When President Ben Ali took power after the political change in 1987, lots of things have been done, a series of reforms have been introduced toward introducing the legal framework for progress in democracy, including the rule of law, including accountability, and also putting human rights at the top of our agenda. I'm afraid lots of what has been said comes from reports, and reports are most of the time not very fair to us. And it seems to me that Tunisia has a story to tell, and a lot of people are bothered by our success story.
OK, let's hold that there for a moment. Let's bring in the journalist here working for Tunisian television. Yes. Uda, thank you very much for being here. In terms of doing your job as a reporter, now, the conception here is that there isn't a free press, that what you do is controlled. What do you say about that?
You know, I would like you, I invite all the viewers that are watching us now to see the address of one of the candidates, which was broadcast on the Tunisian television. And this address, it was like something very unusual. Not a single word was censored, and nobody talked about it because it was in Arabic. So I would like to invite people to go to the site of the Tunisian television, www.tunisiatv.com, and make an effort. Please translate it because it is in Arabic, and you will see that these elections are not like you're saying, are not effective.
OK, but isn't what is said by the opposition, isn't that governed, policed, vetted by the government? They can't say things that are against the government.
This is why I'm telling you about this address.
So that's not the case, you say?
It's not the case at all. And it's like, for TV norms, it was a very long address, and it was not censored. And I would like you to see it, so then we can talk about it afterwards. OK. It's
a tricky one to check out right now, but obviously
I know, but I'm just inviting the viewers.
So in terms of doing your job as a journalist, you don't find any obstruction. Can you question the government? Can you question the president?
Of course we do. Of course we do. This is why I'm telling you, you're not seeing the debates that are, taking place in Tunisia right now, in the Tunisian television. So all these allegations I've heard them for many years now, but things are changing. So I would like to invite you as a journalist, because if you're really interested and concerned about Tunisia, just go and see what is happening really in Tunisia now.
It's a shame we can't take this debate right there to Tunisia and do it that way, which would be a great idea. And the fact that there are two Tunisian women here talking says a lot about Tunisia being very much in the forefront of women's rights in the Arab world. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes,
that's correct.
The status of Tunisian women is unique in the Arab and Muslim world, and lots of reforms again were introduced, starting from 1956 with President Bourguiba, and then consolidated and reinforced by President Ben Ali, especially in the 1990s. And Tunisian women today are everywhere, in politics, in public life, all sorts of jobs. You know that 60% of students are female, 22.7% of MPs are women, and lots of other figures. So,
OK. So you're painting a picture of a society that is opening, that is broadening itself out. However, there does seem to be just one viable candidate to be elected. I'll give you a chance to answer that one in a second. Let me bring in our guest from Beirut, from the Carnegie Middle East Centre, Amel Boubekeur. I hope you can hear us okay here. I hope you've been following what's been said so far. What is your view on events in Tunisia?
Well, I think we are asking the wrong question. I mean, the question is not about censorship or about are the elections going to be held in a transparent way or not. I think the real question is, are these elections meaningful? Can you see an interest among the international community or even among the Tunisians themselves for these elections? And the response is, unfortunately, not. Why that? Because elections, and that's not just the case for Tunisia, that's the case for other Maghreb countries, elections are not bringing change. I mean, we should not, even if change has been the slogan of the President Ben Ali for 22 years, since 1987, a little change is happening, actually. You have a lot of reforms. I would like to differentiate between the concept of change and the concept of reforms. You have a lot of reforms. And Tunisia stands perfectly for the new type of Arab regimes that we have now in the Arab world, which are internalizing reforms, which are indeed internalizing this discourse on pluralism, on women's rights, on education and so on, but which are using these reforms in order to stay in power and not promote change. So I think we should go, in order to understand the real challenge of a country like Tunisia, we should go beyond this idea of Ben Ali versus the opposition and understand what are the mechanisms which have made Ben Ali able to run for a fifth term, or which have made Ben Ali able to stay in power for 22 years. I think that's the right question.
Amel, we'll take it up from there. Hopefully someone there with you can sort out your earpiece, which seems to be giving you some kind of problems there. We'll be back to you very shortly. Before I bring back in our two guests here in the studio, let's link over to Melissa Bell, France24's international affairs correspondent, who is in Tunis for the election this weekend. Melissa, I think, has an insight into what it's like, well, certainly operating as a France24 journalist in Tunisia. What's been happening to you, Melissa?
Well, we arrived, Mark, this morning, and the first thing that happened to us was that the piece of equipment that allows us to broadcast directly to Paris and therefore around the world through France24 was taken away from us. It is a satellite antenna, and it allows us to take any piece of film that we've made, any footage we've taken, and to beam it directly across the world. That was immediately taken from us, and it was explained that it was simply not allowed in Tunisia. And as you watched the chap walk off with a piece of equipment, you couldn't help but ask yourself, what is it they're worried about? Now, after that, we've had to get authorization simply to film in the streets of Tunis. Nothing more serious than that. It eventually came after several hours in the form of a paper that's been kept in the pocket of a chap who will come with us wherever we go. He's been very helpful because, as it turns out, we spent much of the afternoon on the main avenue in Tunis, something like Tunis's equivalent to the Champs-Élysées. We were approached nearly a dozen times by policemen, both in civilian clothing and in uniform, trying to make sure we had the proper accreditation. Even the man accompanying us on behalf of the Tunisian Agency for External Communication with the piece of paper in his pocket was getting annoyed at the level of harassment we were getting. So it gives you an idea of the fact that things here are quite tense. And you were talking a minute ago about the freedom of the media. Certainly for the time being, we haven't been prevented from filming anything, but we are accompanied all the time. And the one piece of equipment that allowed us to get the pictures back to Paris entirely independently has been taken away from us.
Melissa, stay with us. We'll get a response to what you were saying from our two guests here in the studio. Just to remind you, we have the Tunisian MP, Emna Ben Arab, from the Democratic Constitutional Rally, which is the party of President Ben Ali, and from Tunisian television, Ouda Zagdoudi. Emna, I'd like to start with you. Certainly the picture that was being painted both by Amel Boubekeur in Beirut, from perhaps an academic perspective, and from our own Melissa Bell in Tunis, maybe goes against what you were saying.
Well, first of all, talking about change, talking about democracy, everybody knows that democracy is a culture. And we are aware in Tunisia that consolidating democracy is a long path, is a long and winding path. Surely mechanisms and competent state institutions are in place. And from the very beginning, we made it clear that change comes in a gradual pace. we are not and we cannot afford Algeria's near-death experience. This is a small country with scant resources, and the country's working, and we are going our own way in our own pace.
When you talk about Algeria's experience, you're talking about the civil war.
Yes, of course, a decade of civil war. Because overnight they said, well, we are going to turn this country into a democracy with 60 parties or something like that. This is not our way, this is not our approach to do things. And because democracy is a culture, we are moving step by step. And today, when you look at President Ben Ali's program, the first point in this program has to do with adding new steps to the democratic process in Tunisia. And I'm sure with what we've already done, I mean, she was talking, the one in Lebanon, she was talking about...
Amel Boubekeur, yeah?
Amel Boubekeur was talking about the difference between change and reforms. Change cannot come without reforms, and change cannot come overnight. Do you know how this country, or have you learned about how Tunisia was before 1987? It was on the verge of collapse. Economically, politically, we were on the verge of a civil war. Look at the country now. And one thing also which is important is that democracy without preconditions cannot succeed. And we have lots of examples from these, what they call third wave democracies. Preconditions have to do with education. Today, we have 20% rate of illiteracy, 80% the middle class. It's a sizable middle class. We fought extremism, and I believe we succeeded in fighting extremism, and we will continue to fight extremism if ever there's a danger of extremism. So
that is one of the issues on human rights that people take Tunisia to task over the fact that Islamist leaders are in prison. That's one issue. But there are other human rights issues too, as well, which lead to questions about the situation in Tunisia. I'm thinking of the incident 2 years ago. There was some riots related to unemployment in the south. A leader of those riots still in jail over that issue?
Listen, let me be clear.
Please.
We do not have political prisoners. People who infringe the law go to prison. This is normal. This is everywhere. This is in your country.
Okay, we can accept that as the rule of law.
Yes.
So why do the human rights groups like Amnesty International always put a big question mark over your country?
Well, first, Human Rights International has an office in Tunis since 2005, and they do these regular visits to prisons. This is one. Two, last year, we presented our human rights report to the UN committee, Human Rights Committee, and it was appreciated by everybody in this committee. And also, there's something else which is very important, is that when we talk about human rights, people, as I said earlier, people get most of their information from reports, and much of it is wrong. And if you notice something, these people who talk about human rights, these Tunisians, they are the same people with the same arguments, with the same discourse.
Okay, we will get replies to that in the second part. We'll go first to Amel Boubekeur in Beirut at the Carnegie Middle East Centre. That's in the second part of our debate. We're out of time for the moment. One of those issues, I suppose, if the misinformation comes from reports, are the journalists doing their job properly? We have a journalist here who can talk about that. And obviously, we have our own journalist in Tunisia, and she will give us her thoughts on that too. OK, let's wrap up this first part. Stay with us, though. We've got more news coming up. And, of course, the second part of our debate. Stay with us here, live from Paris.
Kazakhstan. Cultural riches, natural resources, tolerance, democracy, youth, creativity, dynamism. Kazakhstan, fully engaged with the world. Kazakhstan, count us in, count on us.
Curious. Modern. Interested. Your world is plural, rich in its diversity. You are mindful of other people and other places. Whether prehistoric or ultra-modern, the world comes to birth for you at Quai Branly.